blessing. And he'll even say there's a blessing in doing it the way I've laid out for you. But how many times have we said, no, that's okay. We'll do it our way. I'm going to do what I want to do. And in it is bondage. Because God lays out the right way. Now, as I thought about this, hopefully you're beginning to personalize this. Maybe what's an example in your life? Or in things that you've seen, where God has laid out a clear way to go, but yet you've rejected God's way and you've gone your way, and there's always a terrible price to pay. You know, the old adage, sin will keep you down longer than you want to stay, cost you more than you want to pay. You ever hear those old adages? It's so true. I was thinking in terms of marriage, right? All of society is telling young people, hey, young people, do what you want to do, man. Get out there. You got to try different, you can live together. Make sure it's going to work before you get married. There's all these alternative messages to marriage. But God says one person, one male, one female for life. That's God's design, and there's a blessing in it. But also often we're not willing to wait and to do things God's way. So before we get too judgmental and jump on the case of these people, we do it every day. So I think one of the things we need to do this week, and even in home fellowships, is let's talk about that. What are some areas in life where we have just abandoned God's Word and done things our way, as we see in our story? Now, verse 3, it says, Then they said to one another, Come, let us make bricks and bake them thoroughly. They had bricks for stone, and they had asphalt for mortar. So they're making these bricks. They're fire kiln. They're called fire kiln bricks, where they actually put them in like an oven and they bake them, so they're really, really hard. But what's interesting is they were using pitch for mortar. Where what is that? Well, that's a petroleum product that's kind of like asphalt. And you can imagine they use that to level out these bricks. Now, this becomes important when we get into the archaeological evidences of this area, because we're going to actually see that this actually shows up on the scene exactly what the Bible's saying. We actually have evidences of this, even in the ruins that we find in today. So, going on in verse 4, it says, And they said, Come, let us build ourselves a city. Build ourselves a city. Notice that this equation has no God in it anywhere. There's no reference to Jehovah, none of the references to God. They are going off on their own. They have no interest in following God's edicts or commands, or to glorify Him or to worship Him. But we see that they're completely all about themselves here. And you'll see that, you ever notice that it seems like when people tend to congregate in heavily dense populated areas, that sin seems to abound? You ever notice that? And we'll see that that's exactly what is going on in our story today. Verse 4. It says, So they're going to make ourselves a city and a tower whose top is in the heavens. Whose top is in the heavens. Now, I don't know about you, but when I was a little kid, and I remember learning of this story in Sunday school, they always painted this picture of the top of this thing going into the clouds. But I think upon closer inspection to the biblical text, and especially the original language, we're going to get a more true picture of what exactly is going on here. So the word for tower is migdal, and it can mean a tower or an elevated stage or a pulpit. And then the word for heavens is shamayim. And if you remember that word, remember in Genesis 1 where it says, And God created the heavens and the earth? Remember that when we did our creation study? It's the same exact word. So you'll remember that heavens, that word heavens, is a pretty flexible word. It can mean the air around us. It can mean the part above us where the birds fly. It can actually mean the extended heavens out where the stars are. So a lot of it depends on the context. But as a little boy, the way they would paint the picture is they would say they were literally trying to build this tall tower all the way up into the heavens of heavens. But what's really interesting is when you start to look at the original language. Now, what I've done here is I've actually put a breakdown of the original language. And the only reason I'm doing this is for a couple purposes. Number one, I want you to know about a tool called Blue Letter Bible. It's a completely free tool called blueletterbible.com or .net, okay? It's amazing. You can actually look at the text word by word, open up the verse, and it will show you the side-by-side text, okay? But I want to begin to paint this picture in your mind because I think for years, especially the Bible, the Sunday school version, is just not accurate to what was really going on here. If you'll notice here on the left, it says, to make us a city and a tower whose top, notice how may reach is in these brackets, unto heaven. Those words don't exist in the original manuscript. Unto heaven or into heaven, that does not exist in the original text. So what you have when you begin to understand the original language is you have a raised stage or a raised structure whose top, the function of this structure was of a spiritual nature. Not that it literally went into the sky. It was a high, it was a big temple. But what they're doing is they're trying to make a structure that allows them to worship their false gods. So kind of what I want you to get out of your mind is I want you to get out of your mind this image. This is not really an accurate depiction of what's going on in our story today. But quite frankly and quite possibly, I think the evidence shows, and this is my opinion, but I've done a lot of research on this and I want to share this with you, the chances are very good that what we were really looking at in today's story is one of these. It's called a ziggurat. And it was a pagan temple. And it was made, it is a tower, it is elevated. You can see here that it's kind of an elevated platform. And what they would do is they would put an altar at the very top and they would worship their foreign gods. Okay, now keep in mind that, most researchers agree that, excuse me, this probably happened as close as 100 years after the flood. So it did not take them very long to get very corrupt and very sinful very quickly. Okay? So what you're looking at is this huge structure with a lot of effort and a lot of resources simply to worship false gods. Now, why do I think this? Why do I think that this is really what we're talking about? Well, it turns out that we have archaeological ruins. And these are found right in the area that we would today called modern-day Iraq, which was then the plains of Shinar. So literally, we have these ancient ruins that date right around the time of the post-flood. Okay? And what we have here is the ancient ruins of these temples that were made to these false gods. Now, what I find amazingly fascinating is guess what they're made out of? They're made of bricks that were made in a kiln. And guess what their pitch is? Or what's between the bricks? Pitch. So what we have here is a ruins in the same area made of the same thing that the Bible references. And this is all uncovered through archaeology. So once again here we see that the sciences always corroborate what we see in the Scriptures. So this is why I believe that we're not talking about a long skinny tower that spirals literally into the clouds, but what we have is a people that are making a structure so that they can begin to do their foreign god work. They're rejecting the God of the Bible and they're doing their own thing. Okay? This is just another picture of another archaeological dig and find that's going on in that same area. Verse 4 says, "Let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be scattered abroad over the face of the whole earth." Wow. So now the motivation behind why they're doing this begins to come out. You see that their sole motivation was pride and arrogance. It was all about them. Let us make a name for ourselves. Let us make these huge walls. Let us make this great tower. And people will know us for generations because of this great thing that we've done. They wanted to really put it out there. God's plan wasn't good. They wanted their own plan. They wanted to make it not about God, but they wanted to make it about them, and they wanted it to be magnificent. But more importantly, what they wanted here is they really did want a one world order. They wanted everyone in one place, under one language, under one dictator, and that is what they were shooting for.